Hello, good morning, dear viewers. Welcome to African Morning Breakfast Show, coming to you live on SSBC from South Sudan capital, Juba. My name is Majur Chol Khor, and in our today editions of African Morning Breakfast Show, we are going to look at how young people in the Republic of South Sudan can contribute to improving the economy of South Sudan. And I'm profoundly honored and exceedingly humbled to say it. I'm joined right here in the studio by one of the young South Sudanese analysts. That is none other than Akol Nyok Akol Dak, and is managing director for Oros Consulting Company Limited. Akol, allow me to say it. I'm profoundly honored and exceedingly humbled to have you in the studio.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And dear viewers, we are going to analyze more about how can young people in the Republic of South Sudan contribute to the economy of South Sudan, how to improve the economy meltdown. And Akol has been one of the young people in the Republic of South Sudan that is influential and contributing into how young people in South Sudan can improve the economy and also have their own lifestyle of how they can do anything that is possible for them to earn a living. And not forgetting, in the last 2 days conference of oil and energy, Akol has been one of the moderators and is going also to help us understand how can young people also look at the oil and energy as a way of improving the economy in the Republic of South Sudan. Now let's have a break and go to the field where most of our reporters went to the field and compiled the report in some streets of Juba, especially at Konyo Konyo.
Morning breakfast show on SSBC with me, Paul Bit. There is too much jam at custom roundabout where there are people are busy rushing for their places of work. As you can see behind me here, there are several kind of cars, borders, rickshaws, wherever. They are rushing to their respective places of work.
كل جام مليان هناك سبب الجام مليان هناك لأن باصات بجي هناك منزل الفصل جار بقاعدة تاني برجع في الشارع داك بعمل شنو بعمل المشكلة بتاع شنو بتاع الجام دي سبب الجام وسواقين طبعا ما بعمل معنا كوبريشن كويس دائما من بيشاكلوا معنا في الشارع لكن النظام شغل بتاعنا للنظام هنا دايرين سلام الناس ودايرين كمان الشوارع يكون فاتح لزول الماشي مستشفى وللناس كمان الماشين مخاطب والماشين بيوتهم.
We will also look into how these changes of black market is impacting on the local and the importance of this business here in Gibil who can become
ودي هسه انا ببيو بألف لانه جاي من انا جبته من برا وحاجات دقالي شويه
وسوق سكر
زي ده بألف بس انا ببيو بألف
وجبال كده
زودار كده كان ممكن 600 700 كده لكن هسه بألف بس ماشي. النور ابراهيم معك. فالحاجات دي في الزياده بتاعت الدولار اليومين اللي فات ده كان ممكن رفع شويه لكن الاسعار يعني في حاله ما في حاجه زياده شديده اللي بخافوا منه. اي نحن عندنا الخواتم ياهو ب 500 و600 وكده يعني نفس الاسعار في زيادات 100 كده يعني من الاسعار القديمه.
أنا بشر قال هنا.
يلا في حكومة قاعدة تقول شنو في ناس سيتي كانسل بيجوا وناس ستريت بقول أسعار نزل وفي ناس قاعدة تجي زي ده بس
so بجد يعني أنت بونس حقيقة ناس ما بيجا ما في زول جا لأنني قال ليه حاجاتكم نقالي ولا كده so أنا
قال بس قاعدة تسرو
أنا بس بشتري منهم تمام من يابو دي قالي أنا بشتري كمان بجزيرة حاجة بس.
Welcome back to dear viewers from that report from my colleague Denga Chol and Paul Bith compiling more about the life of people at Konyo Konyo Street. And back right here in the studio, as I said earlier, I'm profoundly honored and exceedingly humbled to be joined by a young South Sudanese entrepreneur that is Akol Doc and is also an economist analyst, going to help us how South Sudanese young people can come together and join entrepreneurship and make a living, something that they can do for a living. But before we look into our normal business of why we're here today in the studio, can you have a shout out to South Sudanese?
Special shout out to South Sudanese, especially young South Sudanese who are hustling, who are doing their best and trying to make a living. It may be difficult, but you be patient and things will improve.
Things will improve. and this is from an entrepreneur and economy analyst. Let's look at, before finding out more about how young people in the Republic of South Sudan can join the entrepreneurship industry and become people that they want to be. But let's know, who is you?
Thank you for having me. My name is Akol Nyok Akol Doc. I'm a young South Sudanese. I'm an entrepreneur. You can say I'm a political and economic analyst. And I am somebody who loves my country and believes in the best of the country. Like many of us, during the war, we had left our home area. I was born in Rang, in Upper Nile State, and I migrated to the United States in the 2000s, where I did most of my education, and I decided to come back to South Sudan after graduating from university. And when university, I studied a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science, and there I took a lot of courses in development and economics and political development. And when I came back, I realized that the best place to make an impact is entrepreneurship. So when I came back, I started doing small business, started doing different consultancy work, doing advisory, research, and trainings for organizations, for companies. And then in 2019, I had an opportunity to work in the Ministry of Petroleum, in the office of the minister, then Honorable Wo Daniel Chuang. And from there, I was the executive secretary. And after that, I came back to the private sector. And for me, I'm focused on entrepreneurship. And I believe that in Africa, we have a challenge of the private sector. Everybody thinks that the only way to make money is in government. But for the government to even be strong, they need to have a strong private sector. As we saw in the conference, the government's job is to ensure security, set a rule of law, and set the policies. But production and other things are the job of the private sector. It's the job of the citizens to become productive. That's why I become very passionate about entrepreneurship. I myself, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm in consulting. I'm in agriculture, logistics. I'm a farmer. And I believe that we have to put our money where our mouth is, because right now in South Sudan, many of the sectors are dominated by foreigners. And these foreigners came to South Sudan with nothing, but they worked hard, they were persistent, and they're patient, and now they're successful. With that being said, why can't we as South Sudanese do that? Why can't we take control of our economy? Why can't we farm? Why can't we have factories? Why can't we do these things? The future is in our hands.
Well, the future is in our hands as young people of the Republic of South Sudan, and we will learn more from you. How can't we improve the future that is in our hand? And a common man in South Sudan and ordinary young South Sudanese, how can you describe entrepreneurship in a layman language for people to understand better?
Entrepreneurship is somebody offering a service or a product to make money. An entrepreneur is somebody who sells maize and wants to make a profit on the maize. An entrepreneur is somebody who farms and sells their produce to the farm. An entrepreneur is somebody who is creative and wants to solve problems through the private sector. Because many of the times we all believe, and this is common amongst many young people, that solutions are in government. That's why there's a big push for people to enter government, to be MPs, to be state ministers, commissioners. But if you are in positions of power, you need a private sector to become productive. And so entrepreneurs is people who want to solve society's problems through the private sector. An entrepreneur could think that we need to farm more, so therefore I'm going to farm to do my part. An entrepreneur could think that I want to start a rickshaw or a boda boda to offer transportation services to people. And in the process, I'll make money. So entrepreneurs, everybody's an entrepreneur at heart. If you're somebody who's passionate about solving the problems of your country and you want to do so in the private sector, you're an entrepreneur.
Well, do you think that in the due course that you are being in South Sudan, have you seen young people getting involved into these businesses that you term to be part of the entrepreneurship?
Yes, I've seen many young people. I mean, you look at almost 70% of this country is young people. And you have many young people who are in energy business, such as the oil sector. A lot of them have gotten a lot of contracts, a lot of business with Depot, GPOP, SPOP, NALPET, and subsidiaries. Some of them have even gotten government contracts. Some of them have done business in logistics. Some of them import stuff. some of them have shops, some of them have rakshas. So you look around, so many young people are working, and this is so positive. It's just that there's some challenges that they've been facing, and some of these challenges we'll discuss later. Number one is access to finance, access to investment, and access to capital. Entrepreneurs have great ideas, they have great energy, and they have great skills, but they do not have the capital, the investment, or the financial support to execute those ideas. And that has been the biggest challenge for entrepreneurs in South Sudan.
Now, how do you term the economy of South Sudan? It has been reported several times that the economy meltdowns in the country is maybe caused due to the lack of entrepreneurship skill or maybe political implications in the country. How do you terms or describe the economy of South Sudan right now?
Well, I think sometimes it's unfair to say that our economy is stagnant or not performing, because the priority of the government since 2013 until now has been peace and stability. Meaning that when you prioritize peace and stability, you say we need to ensure that we have peace and stability first before we can discuss anything else, which is rightfully so. And if you look at other African countries, they have the similar situation. We've had conflicts, is that during conflicts, the priority is ensuring that there's peace and stability. But now that you have the revitalized transitional government and national unity and the revitalized agreement on the resolution of conflict in South Sudan, they've made a lot of progress. Recently, you saw the graduation of the unified forces. You're seeing a lot of people in Juba, and you're seeing a lot more economic activity. Now, this is the time for entrepreneurs to shine, because you have peace in the country. Now, go and showcase your skills. Whereas before, people were hesitant, people were cautious, they were wary of the situation, but now the situation is stable and peaceful. And this is a perfect time for entrepreneurs to perform. The general economy of South Sudan, we're considered an oil-dependent nation, meaning we rely on oil revenues for most of government revenue and for economic activity. Meaning if you're somebody who works in the oil sector as a contractor, as an engineer, or anything, you're relying, that's the oil economy. And the oil economy dominates the other sectors of the economy, because people get money from oil business to go invest in other sectors. That's why many people say the government should use oil to invest in agriculture. But South Sudan's economic potential is mostly in agriculture, because as we speak, we're importing a lot of our food. If you look at, according to FAO, South Sudan is importing almost $250 million US in just grains. You're talking sorghum, rice, millet, maize. Imagine if this can be produced locally and you can have local industries. That's 250 million industry opportunity there. South Sudan right now doesn't have a refinery. Yes, we have crude oil and we're exporting crude oil, but at the same time we are importing refined petroleum products, which means that we're exporting a raw material and importing a finished good, where it should be the other way. You're better off importing the crude and refining it here. So that's an opportunity. And in the conference yesterday, the leadership and people of the business, we discussed plans to have refineries in this country. And finally, you have the fisheries, the wildlife, the tourism sector, which is a very popular sector in South Sudan, considering the beauty of South Sudan. So overall, if you do an economic diagnostic of South Sudan, we're a young country, we're still figuring ourselves out, we're still learning about ourselves, but we have a lot of potential. If we talk about the oil sector, we still are not reaching our peak. 90% of South Sudan's oil potential is untapped. Now imagine if that gets tapped. Then the agriculture sector, then the fisheries, and the mining, as we heard from the Minister of Mining at the conference on the first day, there's mining potential. We have limestone, we have gold, we have diamonds, we have a plethora of minerals. So this country is very blessed. It's just that circumstances have hurt our growth.
Thank you so much. And dear viewers, thank you so much for following us. This is African Morning Breakfast Show, coming to you live from our studio, South Sudan capital, Juba. My name is Majur Chol Khor, and my guest this morning is none other than Akol Dak. Akol is a political and economics analyst and is one of the young South Sudanese entrepreneur. And as I said earlier, Akol has been one of the moderators of the fifth Oil and Power Conference, which was organized in the last 2 days in South Sudan capital, Juba, here at Radisson Blu. We're going to find out from Akol as young entrepreneur how young people can use this opportunity of oils and power as a way of them coming and empower themselves and improve in entrepreneurship skill? Do you think oil and power can have an impact in economy as young people are concerned to join the entrepreneurship industry?
Definitely. Definitely it can. I think oil and power has the potential because, like I said, South Sudan is relying on the oil sector. This is the majority of the economy relies on this. And from the conference, we saw that we still have not tapped into the potential of the oil sector. If it's an exploration, South Sudan has the third largest oil reserves in sub-Saharan Africa after Nigeria and Angola. And right now, Nigeria produces almost 1.7 million barrels per day. Angola is producing the same amount. So imagine if we're able to tap into our potential and explore other blocks. Number one, as we discussed in the conference, how do we enhance the recovery of the current operating blocks? How do we enhance them and ensure that they produce more? And number two, how do we explore more blocks and get other blocks to become productive in different parts of the country?
Do you think that young people right now, maybe in the time that you have been moderating, what did the investors say that they're going to do to bring in young people into oil and power or oil industry?
Well, if you look at it, many of the companies that are working in South Sudan, the contractors, people who do technology, such as on Monday, Schlumberger just opened a training center in collaboration with the Ministry of Petroleum at the University of Juba. The South African Strategic Fuel Fund discussed ways to build capacity and what they want to do. We heard from Now Drilling. We heard from the chairperson of the South Sudan Petroleum Engineers and Geologists. What many investors and companies want to do, they want to have more South Sudanese working with them and give them opportunities for employment, because it's not fair that you're bringing engineers and technicians from different parts of the world when you can bring them locally. And there's so many skilled and qualified South Sudanese, it's just that they're not given the chance. And so the local content policy of 2019, which was passed by the Ministry of Petroleum, stipulates that a certain amount of jobs have to go to young people. A certain amount of jobs that maybe is technical have to go to young people. And if you see that there's not technical young people, you as a company have to build the capacity of those young people. There's many South Sudanese around the world who know the oil sector, who have experience, 20, 30, sometimes 40 years of experience, but they're not given the opportunity, they're not given the chance. We need to tap into those people. And then also the young people coming up, we need to mentor them, give them the guidance, give them the inspiration so that they can grow in the sector.
When you look at the young people in South Sudan, maybe psychologically, you may think that some young people think to become an entrepreneur and a successful entrepreneur in South Sudan or elsewhere, you may need to be a graduate from university or maybe from high schools, or maybe you have attended maybe some colleges and all this. What do you think it takes for an entrepreneur, a young person to be an entrepreneur and be a successful entrepreneur?
I think we have to identify that, okay, what is an entrepreneur? What skills? What you need is skills, management and leadership skills. I mean, entrepreneur, if you're running a company that does technology, you can just hire people to do those technologies. And yes, there's a psychological feeling that you have to graduate from a good school, you have to have good graduated high school or do a master's or PhD, which is not necessarily true, because if you look at it, Bill Gates is a college dropout, the founder of Microsoft. Mark Zuckerberg is the founder of Facebook. He's a dropout. And recently you saw that the richest man in India is also a college dropout. So you don't necessarily have to have a degree to go into business. You just have to have a good idea, have a plan for yourself, and also we have to stop this idea that having a degree means that you're smart. If you're somebody who keeps learning themselves, keeps expanding their skills, and keeps developing themselves, you can be very, very powerful. You'll be very powerful because you'll be able to speak, you'll be able to talk, but there's some people who have gone to school, have stopped learning. So I think that we need to talk about how people should continue self-education, even once you finish school. Keep reading, keep learning, keep taking courses, and keep developing yourself.
Akol will come and find out how you make it to be a successful entrepreneur and become an analyst. and so that to inspire other young people outside there. But dear viewers, let's have a break, and we'll be right back shortly. Welcome back, dear viewers. Thank you so much for following African Morning Breakfast Show on SBC. This week, in this edition, we are talking about how young people in the Republic of South Sudan can take an initiative and become successful entrepreneur, and how they can contribute into the economy of the country, and helping us understand more of how you can do that as a young South Sudanese is an entrepreneur and political analyst, none other than Akol Dak. Akol, welcome back.
Thank you.
Yeah, I did say it earlier that when we're coming back from this break, we will find out from you how you make it to be a successful young entrepreneur in the Republic of South Sudan. So how did you make it?
I would say my journey is still going on. I wouldn't say I made it. I'm saying that every day there's always a learning experience, but my attitude is to keep learning and take things step by step. You know, day by day, have a plan for what you're doing today, and also have a long-term plan that you're going after, and be persistent. You're going to face challenges. Every day you face challenges, but how you overcome those challenges is important. There's a movie that I like. I think every season, the movie Rocky says it's not how hard you hit, it's how hard you can get hit and get back up. So that's the motto I live by. And I would say I'm trying every day. I'm trying every day to do my best and grow myself, grow my business, and find ways to inspire others to do the same.
What is the current business that you are running?
Well, my main business model, I'm doing advisory services at Oris Consulting. We do business advisory services, including communications, research, and training. So I do different training for companies, advise companies on their communication strategy, and advise them on how to develop plans and investment strategies. So that's my main business. And then on that, I'm a farmer. I do some farming and mostly focus on small crops like onions and tomatoes and those things. And I'm in the beginning stages and I'm just growing slowly.
So basically, talking about farming, why do you choose to come and do farming in South Sudan?
Because farming is the future. You know, for me, my father was an agriculturalist. In my area that I come from, Rang is very known for agriculture. So we all farm there. And so the farming season is important because food security is important. We have to be able to feed ourselves. This thing of importing food from other countries is dangerous, especially a country like South Sudan. We have issues of famine. We've had issues of food insecurity across the country. And I believe that I'm doing my part to help solve the problem. Even if it's something very small, I like to believe that I'm doing that small thing to the best of my ability.
So how did your farms been helping you?
It's good. So the farm season is broken into two. You have your rain-fed schemes, which is you wait for the rains to come, and this is usually starts between July to October. And this one, people cultivate crops like sorghum, sesame, millet, and maize. So that one is by far the most popular. That's where many people do it. People are farming tens of thousands of fedans. And then you have your irrigation farm scheme. And this irrigation farm scheme is focused on farming by the river and bringing pumps so that you can draw water from the river in order to satisfy. So irrigation farming is good for gardens, is good for tomatoes, onions, cucumbers, peppers, okra, and these variety of crops, even watermelon. And so my experience that I've learned that there's a lot of potential. South Sudan is very fertile land, and this can be done across the country, and it's good that the Nile is such a blessing, and it can really make a big difference to people's lives.
What did it take you to come up with the initiative of having your own farm?
Well, my family are farmers. My father's a farmer. My uncles are farmers. My cousins are farmers. It was something I noticed that I wanted to do, so I just started doing it, even small.
So in terms of facilitation, it didn't take you long?
It doesn't take long because, you know, for everything you have to start small. For me, I've been just doing small, meaning, okay, if the idea that you have to start business and make money quickly doesn't make sense. Even Facebook, their first year, they didn't even make $20 million, but now they're almost $1 billion company. So I started small with about 2 fadans, and I cultivated onions. And from there, I really enjoyed it. And then I did chickens. I have some chickens. I brought chickens and I would raise chickens.
You mean chicken farm?
No, not chicken farm, but like raising chickens.
Okay.
And then selling them on market, raising goats. Obviously, being a Nilotic, we have cattle. But how do we commercialize those cattle? You don't want the cattle to sit there. So I started realizing many people see it as more culture and they don't see the business side. So I started looking at how can I make this a business? How can I ensure that I'm making profits from this business?
So how sure are you going to make profits?
Well, it's planning. Like I said, any entrepreneur is planning, meaning that as a business, you have to ask yourself, how much money am I investing in this business? You call it your capital expenditures. For example, if I want to do an onion farm, I may say I need maybe 500,000 SSP for all the equipment, everything I need to start it. And this equipment I can use for 5 years, meaning that this money can be paid over 5 years. And then from there, I have my operating expenses, which you call your OPEX. And this includes the labor on the farm, bringing up the seeds, the pesticides, the herbicides, maintenance of any pumps and any contingencies. And then at the end of the season, you see how much you've produced. For example, if you produce 100 bags of onions and the price of onions in the market is 10,000 SSP, you have now 1 million SSP. And then you calculate all your expenses and then that's your profit. Then your profit, you can reinvest it into your business, or you can just take it because it's yours. But I always say reinvest some of your profits. I mean, the good thing about people who farm in the rural areas, about some of the young people, they're very creative, they're very smart. They don't just farm, they have logistics, they import goods, they trade, they're moving around. So it's good to have a diverse portfolio. But in the beginning, if you're starting, you can start it. If you're somebody who has a job, if you're somebody who wants to start step by step, start with something small and then grow. You find yourself after 3 to 5 years, you'll be making very, very good money in your business.
Looking at you, and I believe you have encountered a lot of challenges on the way to make it to the stage you are right now. Would you mind to maybe share your challenges with our viewers and how you address them?
Yeah, I face a lot of challenges. Some of the biggest challenges, I'll talk mostly about, so I'll start with farming. The biggest challenge is money, access to capital, access to investment. Sometimes you may not have the money that you want to. Even when you do have the money, there are certain circumstances that come, such as you have pests, you have floods, you have so many things that you can say acts of God that aren't within your control. And these things happen very often. Some of which I faced it many times. And it's challenging because it's frustrating, but that's part of the struggle. That's part of the journey. You have to face those challenges. And then with other sectors of business, such as with consulting, different stuff, it's challenging getting clients because a lot of people may want to hire another international company to do training or a foreigner to do training when you're here. So you get frustrated because people may not believe in you. They don't believe in your abilities, but you have to believe in yourself and you have to continue to grow. And for me, with that being an analyst, I've had the pleasure that I've started step by step. I used to just write in my newspaper in college, now I get invited as a guest to analyze and commentate on CNBC Africa, CGTN Africa, Al Jazeera, Africa News. And so it's a journey. And this thing didn't happen in one day. It took time. But you have to be persistent, and you cannot allow these challenges to force you to give up. Face them and say, it is what it is. I'm going to move forward, because there's some things that are not in your control. But do what you can do that's in your control, and you will be successful.
Good. Do that and you will be successful. Now, let's talk about the political aspect of the economy. As political analyst and economic analyst, do you think that in South Sudan there has been political interference with the economy of the country?
Well, I think we have to look at the current situation that we're in. The political arena is dominating the economic arena due to the transitional government that we have. You have 5 vice presidents, 35 ministers, 10 deputy ministers. We have 10 state governors, 3 administrators, chief administrators in the administrative areas. So the political arena, whether we like it or not, and this around the world, dominates the economy, because issues like taxes, tariffs, customs, government spending influence the economy, because how the government spends its money influences the economy. How the government sets exchange rates in the market influence the economy. And so many people say that, the economic sector is separate. No, that's why many people argue that it should be called political economy, because you cannot have an economy without addressing the political side. And this is a role where a lot of activists and civil society can play in advocating for policies that enhance economic growth. Because right now, the government wants to see economic growth, because when there's economic growth, the government will get more revenue in taxes. The government can fight unemployment because more young people will be employed. And then the government can see more growth, because if people have more money, their standard of living is going to increase. So the political arena for sure dominates the economic arena. But what we're seeing now in South Sudan, you're seeing a transitional government, and in 2 years plans for an elections. So that has been mostly the focus of many people, which has taken away from the economic arena. And I think on top of that, many people believe that you're better off being in the government as opposed to being in the private sector. So a lot of even some bright entrepreneurs might run after politics to be MPs, to be governors, ministers, instead of being in the private sector, which is okay. That's their choice. But the private sector still needs people there. And I think the private sector and the government side, the economic and the political side, have to work together. The government has to listen to the private sector people, listen to the business people, listen to entrepreneurs, hear their challenges. But also the private sector, the economic side, should listen to the government, say, this is their priorities, this is our challenges, and this is why we're doing this. And I think that's a way to find harmony between the two.
Now, I want us to briefly talk about the current rate of US dollars against South Sudanese pound. If you go to the black market, you find that always sometimes 65, 64, and young people are putting blames on the government, that government is not doing enough to improve on the exchange rate of the local currency against the foreign currency. Do you think that also affects young South Sudanese entrepreneurs?
Yes, I mean, the exchange rate affects business, and that's a given, because exchange rate affects your inability to import goods. Because, well, we have to understand what the basic foundations of exchange rates. South Sudan has something called a floating currency, meaning your currency is tied to the market, to supply and demand. So the supply and demand change. But us as South Sudanese, we have to take responsibility. We demand more dollars in SSP, so when you have a demand more dollars, the dollars go up. And for us locally, we don't produce anything besides crude oil. We don't have factories. We don't produce our own food. So everything that enters the country has to be imported, so they need dollars. And the only source of hard currency for the central bank is oil revenue. So the only source they get is oil revenue. Then they take this money, and then now they have to take that money and then use it to import foods, import essential commodities. But I do think that this affects entrepreneurs, but I think that also means there's an opportunity, because when you find a problem, if you're an entrepreneur and you want to be creative, you can start a factory. When you start a factory, you can produce your own maize, your own cooking oil, and that cooking oil, you'll sell it in SSP because you're producing it locally, so there's no reason to import it from a neighboring country. And when you sell in the market, now that trader who was buying it from Kenya or Uganda, who used to take USD and have to import it, is buying it from you in SSP, which means the currency will become stronger. And then on top of that, our economic behavior has to change. For many of us, our family is outside of South Sudan, so we need USD. So the currency situation is tied to the behavior of the South Sudanese consumers.
Well, it's a call. Because of time, I want us to break it down a bit and maybe in the next 5 minutes to conclude the show. But let's look at the oil and power conference where you were one of the moderators. You'll see most of the young South Sudanese that are involved in this business of motorcycle, doing border business. And I believe if you take a drive or a ride around Juba and other parts of the country, you'll find the price of fuel is not something that we can talk about. You know how it is. So basically, do you think that there is something that the government can do to work on the fuel price to improve the business, the young entrepreneurs, young South Sudanese that are doing this business of border in order to earn a living? Because I believe if they try to do that and save something at the end of the day, they can be able to be a great entrepreneurs in the country. So what do you think the government can do?
Well, I think when we talk about the issue of fuel, we have to look at the source. We're importing fuel, if it's petrol or diesel, and we're importing it from countries that import it. Because if you see, there's not a refinery in Kenya or a refinery in Uganda. So we're importing this fuel from refineries in different parts of the world. And the solution is simple, and they discussed this yesterday at the Oil and Power, and my conversation with some of the senior officials is like, build a refinery. That solves the issue, because if you build a refinery, the price of fuel will go down because you're producing the fuel here in South Sudan. And the fuel will just be transported to Juba or to Wau, to Malakal, to Torit, different parts of South Sudan, instead of being brought from the region. And when it's brought from the region, people have to take hard currency to import that fuel. But when it's produced locally, the price will go down, because the region fuel is expensive because it has to come from that refinery, go on a ship, come to Mombasa, then from Mombasa has to be put on a truck, then on the truck has to be brought to Juba, then from Juba offloaded. There's a lot of costs involved in that whole process. But now if you just have a refinery in South Sudan, and from that refinery is coming to Juba, the price is going to go down. And now if the price goes down, the price of energy is going to go down across the country, because if fuel cheaper, people can drive their cars. People will drive their cars. Boda drivers can do their business easier. The cost will go down. Even the cost of transportation will go down of consumers. So I think the biggest solution for that is to build a refinery.
I always ask these questions, and that young people in the Republic of South Sudan always put blame on the government, that the government is not doing enough to improve the economy of the country. And the government is saying the young people are not doing enough also to work hard for the economy to get improved. Who do you think is behind the economy meltdown in South Sudan?
Well, I think we need to take a step back, take a deep breath, and not blame each other. Because when we blame, we're not solving a problem. When you say who's behind the economic meltdown, nobody's behind the meltdown. I mean, when you say that, you're implying that somebody is deliberately destroying it. I don't think anybody's deliberately destroying. But I do think there's a misunderstanding where the government feels like, okay, we cannot be in the private sector. You guys need to go do the private sector. We're doing our part. We're the regulators. We're in charge of developing the policies. We're in charge of regulating the economy. Whereas the private sector feels like you guys are not doing enough. And like I said earlier, this is where dialogue has to take place between the government and the private sector. And we have very different associations. You have the Chamber of Commerce, you have the Chamber of Energy and Minerals. You have so many different private sector institutions that should come together, sit down with the government and discuss, this is what we think you guys should do. This is the challenge that we're facing. And then the government should say, no, we can't do this. This is how you should support us. And it needs to stop. We need to stop blaming each other, because when we blame each other, we're all hurt, because the economic situation is affecting all of us. When the dollar goes up, it affects all of us. When the price of fuel goes up, it affects all of us. When the price of cooking oil and the price of bread goes up, it affects all of us. So nobody's behind the economic meltdown. I think that government can do more and the private sector can do more. But what I call on the private sector and I call on the government to sit down and work together to find solutions to help the economy.
Call Doug, thank you so much for making it to SABC studio. Before I let you go, what could be your message to young people in South Sudan who are trying their best in entrepreneurship and also to improve the economy of the country?
My message to young people is simple. Be patient, have a plan, and pursue that plan. And be persistent. Don't look at what somebody else is doing. Don't look at what your friend is doing. Think about what you want to do and go after it. And don't give up. No condition is permanent. Things will improve and have hope.
Thank you so much. And to you, dear viewers, thank you so much for following African's Morning Breakfast Show on SABC. My name is Majur Chol Khor, and this week in our editions of African Morning Breakfast Show, we have been talking about how young South Sudanese can get involved in entrepreneurship and also to improve the economy of the country. And with me as being a call duck, an entrepreneur and political and economy analyst, and he has been one of the moderators of Oil and Power Conference that has been happening in Juba for the last 2 days at Radisson Blu, helping us more. And thank you so much, Akol Dak, for making it to our studios.
Thank you for having me.
I do appreciate it. And back to my colleague in the technical studio, I have to say it has been your host, Majur Chol, and have a lovely day as you enjoy the rest of the program on SBC.